In Laboratory Reddit, today's story is...
My godfather tried to shame me for being a virgin. I told everyone about his HIV and his girlfriend threw the ring at him. Let me give you some context. My husband Nate and I met at university. I was 2 years younger than him. We met at a university party where he and his friend Thomas had a certain reputation for womanizing. In fact, the girls warned each other about them in the corridors and dormitories. My friends advised me to stay away, and I was planning to listen to them. That night at the party, I was actively trying to avoid them, but Nate came up to me. He had a natural charm that was impossible to ignore. He was not only eloquent, but also kind and showed a genuine interest in getting to know me. There was something about the way he spoke and behaved that set him apart from the reputation that preceded him. Although he captivated me, I didn't take the next step after the party because I had my doubts. However, Nate persisted. Over the next few days, he found ways to run into me or start conversations, always with the same warmth and enthusiasm. Over time, I began to let my guard down. Against my initial judgment, I agreed to go out with him, thinking it would be just a casual date. To my surprise, Nate exceeded all my expectations. During our date, he was completely honest with me. He spoke openly about his reputation at university, without being defensive. It was refreshing and showed me a side I wasn't expecting: mature, self-aware and reflective. After that date, we started seeing each other more often, spending time together and really getting to know each other. As the weeks went by, our bond grew stronger. I began to see the real Nate, who was much more than what people said. Little by little, I fell in love during this nascent relationship. Tom, Nate's best friend and roommate, made it clear from the start that he didn't like me. The two of them shared a flat during university, they split the rent and spent a lot of time together. Naturally, I would run into Tom every time I visited Nate. Tom made no secret of his dislike for my presence in Nate's life. Although he never said it directly, his actions and comments spoke for themselves. When Nate and I were together, Tom would make fun of me, roll his eyes exaggeratedly or make indirect comments about how Nate was getting bored of spending so much time with just one woman. For him, it was incomprehensible that his once carefree and fun-loving friend was now devoting so much attention to me alone. When Nate couldn't listen, Tom would tell me, almost with pleasure, that Nate would eventually get tired of me, like he did with everyone. According to him, it was only a matter of time before Nate lost interest and moved on to the next girl, as he always did. However, that didn't happen. Nate and I grew closer and closer, and it was clear that Tom was not only surprised but also uneasy about this. When we formalized our relationship, Tom's teasing turned to open hostility. I clearly remember an argument that left me shocked and hurt. Tom confronted Nate, questioning his decision to be with someone like me. He mocked me, pointing out that I wasn't beautiful or even blonde, implying that I wasn't good enough to be Nate's girlfriend. It was a cruel blow that clearly sought to belittle me. I'm glad Tom attacked me so openly because it made Nate see for the first time how much his best friend despised me. Fortunately, Nate didn't tolerate it. He yelled at Tom for saying those things about me and forbade him to ever speak that way about me again. Nate made it clear that he wouldn't allow any disrespect towards me. It was comforting to see how he defended me. Instead of backing down, Tom stood his ground. He insisted that he knew Nate better than anyone else and, based on their years of friendship, he was convinced that I was not the right woman for him. This led to a heated argument between them. Nate demanded that his friend apologize to me, but Tom stubbornly refused, increasing the tension between them. After this incident, Nate and I began to distance ourselves from Tom as much as possible. Nate was deeply upset by the way Tom had spoken about me and his refusal to respect our relationship. For me, it was a relief that Tom showed his true colors and that Nate supported me. The way Nate defended me only strengthened my feelings for him. It was clear that he wouldn't allow anyone, not even his closest friend, to belittle what we had built together. When it came time to renew the lease, Nate decided not to continue living with Tom. Instead, we decided to take the next step in our relationship and look for a place to live together. This decision made Tom even more furious, as he took it as a personal betrayal. He was so furious that he confronted me one day on campus, losing control. He yelled at me in front of everyone, accusing me of being the reason Nate wasn't renewing his lease with him. He claimed that I had come between them, destroying their friendship. I didn't want to back down in the face of such unfounded accusations, especially considering how dramatic and irrational he was being. I stood my ground and told Tom clearly that he needed to stop exaggerating. Nate and I had made a mutual decision to move forward in our relationship, and it had nothing to do with him. I told him that if he had a problem with that, he should talk to Nate instead of taking it out on me. When Nate found out about this confrontation, he was furious with his friend. He confronted Tom directly, shouting at him and setting clear boundaries. Nate warned him point blank to stay away from me and never to speak to me like that again. As planned, Nate and I moved in together, starting a new chapter in our lives. With that, we made a conscious decision to remove Tom from our lives. It was a difficult decision for Nate, given their history as friends, but it was necessary for the health of our relationship. After college, we moved to a different city for work. Our relationship has continued to grow and we have been very happy together. 3 months ago, Nate proposed to me and of course I said yes. He is my soulmate, and all our friends and family are thrilled for us. It was during this busy but happy time that Tom unexpectedly reappeared. He contacted Nate on Facebook, wanting to reconnect. It turned out that he had also moved to our same city. Tom wanted to meet Nate after all these years and renew their friendship. When Nate told me about Tom, I was a little surprised, but I didn't object. Considering the time that had passed since the problems at university, I saw no problem with them getting together. After all, people change and I trusted Nate's judgment to handle the situation maturely. After their meeting, Nate told me that Tom seemed much calmer and more focused than he had been at university. Tom also showed a genuine interest in catching up with Nate's life and finding out about our relationship. He had even apologized to Nate for all the times he had belittled him during university, which pleasantly surprised me. I hadn't expected such sincerity from Tom and was glad to hear that he had matured. Tom also mentioned to Nate that he was engaged to his girlfriend, Georgia, and that they were planning their own wedding. I was sincerely happy for Tom, and it reassured me to hear that he seemed to be at a good point in his life. Over the next few weeks, Nate and Tom spent several weekends playing golf, reviving their old friendship. Nate spoke enthusiastically about their conversations. Unfortunately, my schedule has been very busy between work and wedding preparations. I haven't had a chance to meet Tom in person yet. However, we have spoken briefly on the phone a few times. He was polite and friendly during these conversations and, although I was cautious at first, his behavior suggested that he had really matured. Today, while Nate and I were discussing the wedding, he surprised me by asking if he could make Tom his best man. So far, Nate hadn't decided who he wanted for that role. I understand how close they once were. It's clear that this decision means a lot to Nate, especially given how they've reconnected in recent weeks. Although I want to say yes, I can't help but feel some trepidation about this possibility. I recognize that people change and, from what Nate has told me, it seems that Tom has matured since our university days. In theory, I should feel at ease with this decision. However, I can't forget our history. The things Tom said and did hurt me deeply back then. He didn't accept me at the time and, although he seems polite now, a part of me wonders if those old feelings have really disappeared. At the same time, I know how much Nate values his friendship with Tom. They shared a large part of their lives together during college. And reconnecting now seems to have brought Nate a lot of joy. I don't want to be the one who stands in the way of that or who tells Nate he shouldn't have his best friend by his side on such a special day. If I expressed my discomfort and asked Nate not to make Tom his best man, I know Nate would listen to me without hesitation. That's how he is, considerate, always willing to put my feelings first. I have no doubt that he would respect my wishes simply because he loves me and wants me to feel safe. But I don't want to be the woman who prevents my partner from making a decision that is meaningful to him. I don't want to come across as controlling or as if I'm clinging to old grudges. After all, our wedding is a celebration of love, growth, and new beginnings. And I don't want any negativity from the past to tarnish that. However, there is a little voice inside me that keeps telling me to be careful. I feel caught between wanting to support Nate's happiness and dealing with my own unresolved feelings about Tom. So, Reddit, do I support Tom being part of our wedding celebration or am I overthinking this? Update 1, I have read all your comments and agree that Tom may still have unresolved feelings towards me. But he misses his best friend, Nate, which is why he got in touch after so long. So I have decided to allow Nate to invite Tom to be his best man at the wedding. After reflecting, I realized how much this means to my partner. Seeing Nate genuinely happy about reconnecting with his best friend from university made me understand that this is something deeply important to him. I don't want to diminish that joy or complicate things unnecessarily, especially during a time that should be festive for both of them. Throughout our relationship, Nate has always shown me love, respect, and unconditional support. He stood up for me in the past, even when it meant confronting Tom and setting clear boundaries. That gives me confidence now to trust his judgment and choice. I know Nate hasn't made this decision lightly. So if he feels Tom deserves this role in our wedding, then I'm willing to support him. More importantly, I see this as an opportunity for us all to finally move on from the past. Weddings are moments for love and forgiveness. I hope this can be a turning point. Maybe Tom and I can use this occasion to build a cordial relationship. If not a true friendship, at least I hope everything works out. Update 2, this week Nate and I got married and I finally got to meet Tom and his fiancée, Georgia. I should warn you that things didn't go exactly as we'd hoped. At the beginning of the wedding, Tom seemed polite and friendly towards me. His fiancée was very excited talking about her own wedding plans. It was during the reception that the problems started. As the drinks flowed and everyone began to relax, the atmosphere was festive. Nate and I were having an incredible time, enjoying being the center of attention. It was then that Tom got up to give his best man speech. I expected the usual mix of humor, sentiment, and heartfelt moments. At first, that's exactly what it was. Tom talked about his long friendship with Nate, recalling their college days and the bond they had shared over the years. He was slurring his words a little, which was understandable given how much we'd all been drinking. But his words still made sense. However, everything took an unexpected turn when he included me in his speech. At first, I thought he would say something kind or lighthearted about how I had become part of Nate's life. Instead, he launched into strange and inappropriate comments about me. Tom described me as naive when I first entered university, emphasizing my lack of dating experience. This was true, so I laughed uncomfortably even though it was embarrassing. But then, to my amazement, he mentioned that I was a virgin back then and insinuated that I only fell in love with Nate because he was the first person who touched me. Hearing those words, I felt a lump in my throat. Next to me, Nate's expression reflected my own horror. This was not the sincere or funny speech we had been expecting. It was a humiliating comment directed at me, right in the middle of one of the most important moments of our lives. Yes, it was true that before Nate I had not seriously dated anyone and had little experience in relationships. But what did that have to do with anything? Why mention this now in such a cruel way? What really hurt was when Tom went on to say that Nate was the best I could ever do, suggesting that I had clung to him out of desperation because I had no other options. He said it as if it were a joke, as if we should all laugh, but nobody did. Instead, there was an uncomfortable silence in the room and the guests exchanged uncomfortable looks. I saw the fury in my husband's eyes as he stood up abruptly and walked towards Tom, taking the microphone from his hand. He shouted at him for being so inappropriate. He didn't hesitate for a moment. He wasn't going to allow this to continue. Tom, however, was unfazed. He looked at Nate and shrugged nonchalantly, as if he really didn't understand what the problem was. Then, to make matters worse, he looked at me and smiled arrogantly. "Well," he said smugly, "it's not like I told any lies." In that moment, I realized that his words were meant to humiliate me, to make me feel small and insignificant, and his arrogant attitude made it even more outrageous. It was clear to me that Tom had done it on purpose. It wasn't just carelessness or drunkenness. He had gone out of his way to bring up these details from my past and present them in the most degrading way possible. Why else would he smile like that? Completely aware of how uncomfortable I felt. However, I am not someone to be trampled on. This was supposed to be our day, and I wasn't going to let someone like Tom ruin it. This immature man needed to be taught a lesson. He needed to be put in his place once and for all. With a smile, I took the microphone from Nate's hand. He looked at me in surprise, with a twinkle in his eye, but he didn't stop me. I stood up and turned to face Tom, who for a moment seemed pleased with himself, as if he had achieved some twisted victory. "Well, Tom," I began, my voice firm and controlled. "I'm surprised you mentioned our university days. You seem to have such clear memories of me, but I have some pretty interesting memories of you too." Tom's smile faltered slightly, but he tried to keep his composure. His smile was still there, but I could see the uneasiness creeping into his eyes as he continued. "You know," I continued, "what I remember most about you at university wasn't your great friendship with Nate. It was how you let all the other girls use you and throw you away like a used tissue." I paused, letting that sink in. Tom's face changed, his confidence fading as the room grew tense. But I wasn't finished. Turning to the rest of the guests, I spoke in a slow and deliberate tone. In fact, I even remember how Tom once contracted HIV after sleeping with a prostitute. I remember how people found out, and women started avoiding him at university after that. The room fell completely silent. There were a few gasps, whispers, and uncomfortable looks. I turned to Tom and smiled sweetly. "Honestly, I'm surprised you even have a fiancée now after all that." I paused and added, "Well, good luck to her, I guess." At that moment, Tom's face turned completely red. All color disappeared from his arrogant expression, and he sat with his eyes wide open, his mouth opening and closing as if trying to find words, but nothing came out. His fiancée, sitting next to him, looked absolutely shocked. She turned to Tom, her eyes searching his face for some sign that this was a joke. "Tom," she asked, her voice trembling, "is this true?" Her gaze was fixed on him, full of disbelief. I could see him processing what he had just heard as the reality of the situation sank in. Tom looked as if he wanted the earth to swallow him up. His face was bright red, and I could see panic taking hold of him. He hadn't expected me to reveal his darkest secret. All his arrogance, all his conceit, everything that had defined him up to that moment seemed to evaporate. He was speechless, unable to respond, his gaze jumping between me, his fiancée, and the guests, who were watching this disaster unfold. For the first time, Tom had to face the consequences of his actions, not only for his words, but for the person he really was. As his fiancée looked at him, clearly struggling to assimilate the revelations, I couldn't help feeling a certain satisfaction. Tom had crossed a line, and I wanted to make sure everyone knew exactly who he was. He might have thought he could humiliate me, but in the end, he was the one who was exposed. Finally, Tom had no choice but to admit that everything he had said about himself was true. Hearing this confession, his fiancée Georgia exploded in anger. She shouted at him, her face contorted with disbelief and fury. Without hesitation, she threw her glass of champagne straight in his face. "You lied to me," she cried, with tears in her eyes. "You have HIV and you never told me. How dare you? How could you hide this from me?" Tom, looking completely lost, tried to explain. He said he had been taking medication for years and that his HIV was undetectable. He tried to reassure her that there was nothing to worry about, that he simply couldn't tell her the truth because he was afraid of losing her. He begged her to calm down, to talk about this later, but Georgia wouldn't listen. She didn't believe anything he said. The damage was done, and there was no going back. Georgia took off her engagement ring and threw it in his face, the diamond sparkling in the air before hitting him. "I hate you. You're a liar and I don't trust you anymore," she said in a trembling voice. "This is over. I'm done." Without another word, she stormed out of the reception, leaving Tom standing there, completely humiliated. The room fell silent. Tom followed her, calling out to her as he ran after her. He begged for forgiveness, but it was too late. The damage he had done to both Georgia and his reputation was irreparable. Watching it all unfold, I couldn't help but feel a strange sense of justice. Tom had tried to humiliate me in front of everyone, but in the end, it was he who ended up exposed and destroyed. After this, I braced myself for criticism. I expected some guests and maybe even Nate to be angry with me for what I had done. After all, I had deliberately exposed Tom, if only because he had tried to attack me first. To my surprise, everyone was incredibly understanding. People approached me after the scene, showing their support and understanding. They could understand why I had needed to defend myself. No one seemed upset with me for making the truth public. Even Nate supported me. He took me aside, apologizing for inviting Tom to the wedding. He told me how sorry he was for putting me through all that, especially on our big day, just because of his decision to make Tom his best man. He sincerely assured me that he would never let Tom into our lives again after what had happened. I could see the genuine concern in his eyes. Although I appreciated his support, I couldn't help feeling bad for my husband. Nate is such a good person and always sees the best in others, even when they don't deserve it. It was painful to see him betrayed by someone he had considered a close friend. Someone he had trusted for years. It hurt him to see his old friend behave in such an embarrassing way. Even so, I am grateful for Nate's unconditional support and understanding. He has made it clear that our life together is his top priority and that we will move forward without any more drama from Tom. In the end, I know that standing up for myself was the right thing to do, no matter how chaotic my wedding became. It wasn't just about exposing Tom. It was about defending my dignity and taking control of my own story. I wasn't going to let anyone, especially him, make me feel small or humiliated ever again. And with Nate by my side, I know I have someone who will always support me, no matter what. Update 3. First, I want to acknowledge that I understand why some people say Tom's actions could be considered a crime, especially for not disclosing his HIV status to his fiancée. In many places, there are laws that require people to disclose these conditions in relationships. If Georgia decides to take legal action, I fully support her right to hold Tom accountable for his actions. He betrayed her trust in the worst possible way. I sincerely hope she finds the justice and peace of mind she deserves. For those who think I deliberately exposed Tom out of malice, I want to clarify that was not my intention. Yes, I wanted to get back at him for making fun of me at our wedding, especially for calling me a virgin and humiliating me in front of everyone. But I didn't know that Tom was hiding something so serious from his fiancée. I thought that, at most, he would be embarrassed in front of the guests, but I had no idea that he had also been dishonest with his partner. After everything Tom had done to me, I was simply standing up for myself after years of him treating me badly. I would never have imagined that he was lying to Georgia. And I can't help feeling a certain relief that she now knows exactly who she's with. In a way, perhaps fate helped Georgia. She deserved to know the truth, no matter how painful it was. Although I never wanted to hurt anyone, I couldn't allow Tom to continue acting like that. I needed to defend myself, and if this ended up being the way Georgia discovered Tom's true face, then maybe it was for the best. Regarding Nate, I want to respond to the criticism directed at him. He feels terrible for having invited Tom to our wedding, and he has read all the comments. He agrees it was a mistake. But please understand, he didn't know what Tom was capable of. Tom was kind and friendly to Nate just so he could get close enough to humiliate me later. Nate truly believed that his years of friendship would make Tom behave respectfully at the wedding. He never imagined that Tom would act in such a horrible way. So please don't judge my husband. He didn't deserve to be involved in this problem. For those who suggest I take an HIV test in case my husband is hiding something from me, you can rest assured he is not like Tom. We both have regular health checkups and, unlike Tom, he has never been with women of dubious reputation. He does not have any sexually transmitted diseases. For all of you who are wondering what the real reason for Tom's hatred of me is, I honestly don't know. He just never liked me. I think he wanted to keep his close friendship with Nate during college, but when I came along, Nate started spending more time with me. But I never did anything to Tom. I never tried to take Nate away from him. And I definitely never treated him badly. Tom's rejection of me has always been strange. And honestly, I will never fully understand it. Right now, Nate and I are on our honeymoon, trying to enjoy the peace and quiet after all the drama. We have decided to put this behind us and focus on the life we are building together. I am done with Tom and don't want to talk about him anymore. I did what I had to do and have no regrets. Now I am excited about building a future with the man I love.